And here we go.
I don't have anything on this.
Let's see. All right. So now in the old days, I think it could only work with green screens and good computers, but I think they kept on updating it to a point where anyone can do it, because Skype was able to do it, you know.
All right, we'll see. I'm practicing on one. Oh, but see, then I'm like,
Yeah.
Bo, do you have a choice?
You look really cool though. Your hair looks like trees.
I think when you go into choose virtual background, look on the bottom. Does it say I have a green screen? Click.
It does. And I checked that. So I uncheck it?
Uncheck it. That's it. So it's not everything that's, you know, if you uncheck it, maybe it'll be better. And then you have to do it again. There. So now you've unchecked it. But yeah, there.
Oh, that works.
So now everyone can do this. You know, remember in the beginning, I bought a green screen and a better computer. You know, it's like look at Cheryl. It looks like she's in the office right now. It looks like that she's in the office.
Right. I just put up a Jewish star, if you see me.
Yes, yes. Good job.
All right.
Yeah.
Very nice.
All right.
So let's see. It's 12 o'clock. Anyone sign
We just
on
told you
still?
how we did it.
Let's see. So yeah, nice background, by the way, Heidi. Is that a picture? Did you take that picture?
I didn't take that picture, but I found that picture. But I'm going to go put one on now that I took.
Yeah, you see, people, once you find the joy of virtual backgrounds, your life's never the same. You know, it's like Paul Cohn. Again, every 5 seconds, that man changes his virtual background.
Pretty nice.
So I think that looks like it's 12:01 and no one else is signing on right this second. So I'm going to mute all just so we can get a little quiet. We're going to go into Spotlight for everyone. That is not a virtual background because, oh, by the way, virtual backgrounds don't work with two people. It is one of the things Zoom can't do. So like Joan and Irv, if you try to do a virtual background, one of you would disappear. It's
kind of cool though. Sometimes I look like a floating head.
Yeah, we've tried everything. I try to have a shoulder to shoulder with a green screen. You can't do virtual backgrounds with two people. So it's like speaking on Zoom at the same time. I try to when you go to services in the morning, everyone's singing at the same time. Oh, Hallel is a nightmare. So I think we have 19 squares and I can't see if someone's signing on anyway, so we can get started. It's 12:02.
Let's get started with character counts. Yes. So okay. I will start. You're gonna start with so this is kind of interesting. Right. You know, I want to start with a case study, okay? And I don't have a good answer for this. And what we'll do is I'll read the case study. And then we'll look at some of the text and we'll see as a group if it informs our understanding and our response. Okay, sound good? So here's the case study. Since Alex muted you all, no one can tell me if it doesn't sound good. So yeah. All right. So here we go. Kyle Simmons split his time between his infantry unit and its human resources department. And part of his job was to review draft assessments for all senior leaders in the department and his formation. And while looking over his paperwork, he noticed that his commanding officer had taken credit for one of his ideas. And Kyle had developed this time-saving report for teams to document their work. And the report, that part isn't important. So this was noted as an accomplishment in his commanding officer's annual assessment for his commanding officer, but Kyle, was given no such credit on his review. So the commanding officer praise was heaped on him. But poor Kyle got no recognition. And at first he felt resentment and subsequently then he was angry with himself for remaining silent. Should he have spoken up? And ultimately his anger turned into a sense of superiority, proud of himself that he would not act like his boss did, stooping so low as to steal ideas and then boast about it. So we've all had this or heard of this before. You have an idea, your superior maybe takes the credit, and then how do you handle it? Okay, and now we're going to go to our text.
Okay, we're going into the next character counts. We're going to share a screen. Here we go. We're getting really good at this now. Sharing the screen. The screen is shared. Character counts. Judaism is the religion of moderation. And we hear that all the time. We're not excess. We're not abstinence. We're moderation. You can do it, but not too much, except when it comes to humility. Now, by the way, I might not even agree with what we have written here. This is something that kind of flows. So there are many rabbis, including Maimonides. Okay, Rambam is Maimonides, Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, about the year 1177, about 800 years ago, who says you can never have too much humility. Okay, so let's pick a reader. Oh, let's see. Carol, you look so nice looking at the screen right now. Can I unmute you? I've unmuted you. Can you see the screen?
I can, yes.
Okay. Do you want us to read to us 800 years ago what Maimonides says in the Mishnah Torah on his book on human dispositions? And yet.
Well, I just hope that all I can see every word, because pictures of us and the Whitmans and Heidi are on my right side of my screen. But
mine too, but I have a very big screen.
Okay. And yet there are certain tendencies which man is forbidden to follow in the middle way, but distance himself from extreme to extreme. The good way is not merely that man be meek, but that he should be humble-spirited. Then his spirit will be extremely lowly. This is the reason why it is said of Moses that he was very meek. Numbers 12:3. Not merely meek, but this is also the reason why the sages commanded, saying, be exceedingly humble of spirit. Here, 4.4.
Yeah, pure
they moreover said, he who is of haughty heart denies the head principle. Soda 4b. Even as it is said, thine heart is to be lifted up, and thou forget the Lord thy God. Deuteronomy 8:14. They also said, isolated be he in whom there is a haughty spirit, even a little thereof. Soda 5a.
Thank you. So Maimonides is saying, be humble to a fault. When I used to go to yeshiva, and I remember that the yeshiva buckers, right, would walk around and their heads would be low, and they would always slouching. You know, I'd always say, oh, why is everyone slouching? And they mumble, and they would quote this, and they would say, well, a Torah scholar should be quiet, never like raise their voice. You shouldn't be haughty, and you shouldn't be standing upright. And the way they describe it is that there's a king. If you went in front of a presence of a king and the king is standing in front of you, you do not stand taller than the king. All right? Very hard with Napoleon. So you bow your head. You don't talk louder. And so who is the King of Kings? God. Where is God? Everywhere. And so they came up with this thing where you should always be quiet. You should always be humble. You should always slouch, and and always be super humble.
So interesting. I found these texts a little challenging as well. But then I was reading.
I'm the most humble person in the world. So, yeah.
I thought this would be an interesting one for you. But then I was reading some of the commentaries on this text. And what the commentary said is that arrogance is the main obstacle to true spiritual life. And that in a way, arrogance, right, the opposite of humility, is related to forgetting God and kind of replacing God with oneself. So just kind of interesting, like a different way to think about it.
Like you shouldn't be seen or heard, right? It's almost like Maimonides says, which it's going to be a problem for some of us rabbis. Well, for rabbis especially, but it's a problem because we've kind of said that there is such thing as being too humble. The act of bowing in services, right? So we bow, some people bow too much. And actually the rabbis say there's such thing as bowing too much. Yeah, if you ever watch someone do the Amida, the standing up prayer, Baruch atah Adonai, Baruch Adonai Magen Avraham, there's more Baruch atah Adonais, and we're taught at a very young age, you don't bow at every Baruch atah Adonai. You only bow at like this Baruch atah Adonai and this Baruch atah Adonai. And why? It says because bowing is a form of humility, and no one is that humble. No one should be that humble. No, there was an old joke. I'll just go to the punchline because that's what Jews do. Everyone, the rabbi says, "I'm so, I'm nothing but worm and worm rot," and the cantor says, "I'm nothing but worm rot," and Sam Falk says, "I'm nothing but worm rot," and then the congregant is so moved in the holidays, he goes up and he says, "I'm nothing but worm rot," and the rabbi looks at the cantor and goes, "Look who thinks he's nothing but worm rot," because no one should be that humble, so humility is a problem, because there's also an idea that your voice should be heard. Yeah.
True.
All right.
But some of the commentators would say that by being so humble, it opens up a path. It opens up a different path. And I thought this was kind of interesting that this kind of submission or carrying oneself low is a way to combat like jealousy and competition. And so it kind of opens up one's spirit. If you kind of press down some of those other things, you can open up your spirit to a more spiritual life. So,
and that leads to the second verse, which actually talks about what does it mean to be humble. That's, and they describe that, right? Is the extreme form of humbleness a type of reverse ego? I don't even know what that means.
Let's
go. Where's Mark? Well,
Mark, Mark, tell us what
Abraham Lincoln, tell us. What does that mean? Wait, sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. Wait, there it goes. There, go.
Does it mean if you're extremely humble, that in its way, that's a form of you expressing your high ego? Oh, I'm really humble. Nobody can, I always take the back. Nobody, you know what I mean? And to me, the extreme cases, both the ego, the humbleness, if you will, and the haughtiness, the extreme cases are both bad. A guy that takes pleasure in I'm humble.
Right. It's I think right. Look who thinks he's so humble, right?
Part of it might be the motivation, right? Yeah. Like, are you, and only one knows what one's heart is, right? Yeah. So,
but even the story of Kyle, the case study is he ends feeling superior to his boss, who, I would never do that. And so I think there is a reverse ego going on for many people. Now, it's it's like a mensch. If anyone ever calls themselves a mensch, you'd probably question that person, right? I've never heard anyone go, I'm a mensch. Someone else has to call you a mensch, and probably someone else has to call you humble. Humble people. Yeah, I always say that the best people are the ones who think they're the worst, and the worst people think they're the best. Okay, so let's go to the second verse, because I think it's interesting to see them kind of spell out what is humility, and see if.
And I really like this text.
Do you like that one? Okay.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I think it is.
Let's see. Heidi, can you see the words up there? Here we go. Okay, you printed it up. Okay, so this is a book that
she changed her. Heidi.
Nice. We like your background.
I took that picture in the camera.
Very pretty.
So this is
I'd like to be.
This is called a book called Orchot Tzadikim, The Way of the Righteous, and it's a book written about 1450 CE, about 500 years ago, and no one knows who wrote it.
Which is so interesting because as you read it, you'll see that, we're talking about humility. And so it from what I read, the author wanted to be anonymous, which is so interesting, right? Like not taking credit for, I'm going to say his work, because probably in the 1500s, it probably was 1400s, probably was a him, but who knows? All right, Heidi.
So the modest person.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Just 1 second.
Take your time.
Okay, the modest person judges every man favorably An example of this is when they asked one of the pious, "By what means did you merit to become the master of the wise of your generation?" He responded, "Because I credited every man I saw with being better than I. If he were wiser than I said, he is also more reverent to God than I because of his greater wisdom. And if he were less wise than I would say, any fault he commits, he does unknowingly, but I, whatever sin I commit, do so knowingly. If he were older than I would say, he has amassed more merits than I. But if I were older than he, I would say, his sins are less than mine. And if he were like me in wisdom and in years, I would say, his heart is better directed to God than mine, for I know the sins I have committed, and I do not know the sins he has committed. And if he were richer than I would say, he gives more charity than I. And if he were poorer than I would say, he has more crushed and lowly in spirit than I, and is better than I. And for these reasons, I honored all men and humbled myself before them."
Very good.
Wow.
So, yep, go ahead, Heidi.
No, I was going to say that is the epitome of being humble.
Everyone you meet, you believe is better than you, right? It's not very normal for a human to say every person is better, but that is humility, right? And he comes up with if this person looks better than me, richer, better looking, we're watching The Crown, right? And The Crown is this, if you don't know The Crown on Netflix, we're watching The Crown, and Amy says to me, "God, that's like a horrible life." And I said, and that's one of the biggest complaints about The Crown is that before The Crown, you're like everyone, it's like Camelot. I wonder what the king is doing tonight, and everyone's jealous of the king. And then you find out it ain't so good to be King Arthur and with Guinevere. And so The Crown, everyone's miserable. And you really think that the show is somewhat accurate, that it really is horrible to be Prince Charles or the king or the queen. And it took away the mystery, but I say that about rock stars. My kids would say, "Oh, I want to be a rock star," or "I want to be an actor. I want to be a superstar football." And I'm like, "Show me them at 60. Show me one who's happily married." And by looking at each person and saying, that it's not easy to be, to look.
Heidi wanted to say.
Go ahead, Heidi.
Well, Rabbi, you said that he's referring to all these other people that are better than he, and
they look better on page. Yeah,
I think he's saying they are humbler than he, as much as he is humble. Him, even just his description makes him humble, but he is also describing all these other people that have things or don't have things, and yet they are still humbler than he. So it's kind of that's how I interpret it.
Yeah, he's like, they're more humble than I am, which is probably true about the guy who wrote this.
Yeah, when I was reading the commentary on it, what it was saying is that there's this Jewish understanding called Dan Lachaf Zechut, which means giving someone the benefit of the doubt. And so how they're explaining it is that this man, what does he do? He gives everyone he meets the benefit of the doubt. So he finds something, no matter where they are in relation to him, he finds some way to give them the benefit of the doubt, and it makes his life much richer in a way.
By saying that each person has value.
Yeah, I have to say, years ago, so my sister's older than I am. She is 2.5 years older than me. And we're really, really different. And she said to me one time.
Your mom's here, so don't say anything.
Hi, Mom. Yeah, my sister's wonderful. And she said to me one time, but she said to me, Amy, you're really hard on people. She said, because I was talking with her about I was having some frustration with a friend. And she said to me, you're really hard on people. And it really made me stop and think. And she kind of said that she looked at different people and said, I go to this friend when I need this. I go to that friend when I need that. everybody has a different strength. And it kind of switched my brain a little bit to say, okay, looking at things, giving people like our text is doing, giving people the benefit of the doubt. So it's kind of interesting.
Very nice. Larry, I've unmuted you.
I was just going to say, certainly the commentary was interesting and thought-provoking, but I was also looking at it that it was his way of not becoming complacent with God, because if he accepted that, yeah, I'm more humble than this person, then maybe whoever felt that, okay, then I don't need to continue to grow. So I viewed it from that perspective, is if he was constantly saying I needed to be better, I'm not as good as that person, I'm not as good as, it was to not allow him or her become complacent.
That's great. There's a book in the Talmud called Pirkei Avot, which is like, I don't know, the clip notes of the Talmud. It's so easy to read. It doesn't even have a commentary. And there's a line, one of my favorite lines is, who is wise, right? Everyone is like, oh, they're smarter than I am. And you would say, who's wise? Someone who knows everything. So what is, according to the Talmud, the oral law, who is wise? One who learns from everyone else. It's not one who teaches everyone else. It's one who learns from everyone else. So the wisest people, and I felt like that was in a way, and some people say Solomon said it, but he didn't. But this idea that they learn from everyone else. There's something I can learn from the poorest, the one who's not educated, the innocent. By the way, owner to everyone. I think that's, I found you. It's Cheryl. Cheryl, you wrote, we allow people to do things anonymously all the time. What do you mean by that? And I think I agree. We can hear you.
Okay. Well, I was just thinking, I guess that's part of humility. Remaining humble. People have the option to do a financial donation, and you might say, oh, you've got 24 anonymous, and then you have the listings. And I kind of get why it's important for people to list a name, to show people that they are stepping up to the plate. But you have a cadre of people who say, I'm comfortable staying anonymous.
Yeah,
that works for me. And that's the thing that had come to my mind, whether it's giving something or doing something, that you've done it anonymously, or you've just done some particular act, you haven't said boo to anybody, and you've done it and you feel good about it, and you let it rest.
Yeah. And by the way, I think of it like, right, giving anonymously, but in those of us who work with lots of people, and we throw ideas around in meetings all the time, very often we hear our ideas, being used. and so, the smart rabbi probably doesn't say, that was my idea. That's a bad idea as a rabbi to say, oh, that was my idea. So, the idea is letting other people take credit. And by the way, going back to Mark Diamond's thing about reverse ego, when we see something, we do something anonymously, or we let someone take credit, and and they take all the credit in the world, and we're like, yeah, that was the greatest idea ever. It does actually help our egos too. Being anonymous, it's not, it's like a joke we always have, like, oh, I'm so humble, right? That's, but it's
no, not me.
Oh, I'm so humble. I'm the world's most humble. Okay, so now what's interesting is, so Amy, Rabbi Amy, when you said the opposite of humility, you said was haughtiness. What did you say? What was the
arrogance?
Arrogance. It's interesting what the text does. The text actually puts humility and anger, which I thought was very interesting, because humility is biting your tongue, according to, like, a lot of this is biting your tongue, the first thing. Then anger is losing control of your tongue.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this so many times that I wasn't sure I really agreed that, someone should be overly humble, because if that led to not ever getting angry, which some of these sources are going to say you should never get angry, then I've always said, if you're never angry, you're not going to, that's not a Jewish thing to not be angry. And you also won't make the world a better place. So I'm going to disagree a little in super humble, but I'm also going to disagree with never get angry. So you want to go on to 3?
Let's go.
Okay. We're going to share screen. Number 3, share. Got it. We're moving down. to the second page, okay? And on the other hand, there's anger. Back to Rambam, Maimonides, 800 years ago, okay? And who are we gonna call on? Should we call on Bernice? She's looking at the screen.
Sure.
All right, Bernice, you can see the screen?
I can.
It's good to be on. Okay, so you are going to do Maimonides. This is from Mishnah Torah, chapter 2, verse 3, in Human Dispositions.
So is anger an extremely evil tendency, and it is proper for man to remove himself from it to the other extreme. One should teach himself not to get angry, even over a matter which befits anger. If one desires to engender awe in his children and his household, or in the public, if he be at the head of a community, even if he desire to get angry at them so as to bring them back to the good way, he should only act angry in their presence so as to reprove them. But his disposition must remain calm within himself, even as a man imitates, who is angry when the time calls forth anger, but in reality, he is not angry. The sages of yore said, "He who yields to anger is as if he worshipped idolatry." They also said, "Whosoever yields to anger, if he be a wise man, his wisdom leaves him, and if he be a prophet, his prophecy leaves him. Verily, the life of irritable persons is no life. They have therefore commanded to be afar from anger, so that one will train himself not to mind even the things which do cause irritation, for such is the good way. The conduct of the just is to take insults, but not give insults, hear themselves flouted, but make no reply, do their duty as a work of love, and bear affliction cheerfully. Concerning them, the verse says, but may those that love him be as the rising of the sun in his might.
Okay, there's a lot of words in there.
There sure is.
Moses, I always think it's so funny in the movies and the way we're as children, Moses comes down around the mountain with the 10 commandments, right? Not the 15, and he drops. Okay, he's got the 10 commandments, and he sees the golden calf, and he throws it down. And we're like, oh my God, no one told him to do that. He let his anger get the best of him. But if you look closely in the Torah, there's a real problem, and that is he knows what he's about to see. God says, there they did this, this, and this. He goes down, he sees it. It's almost as if he knew it and then had to be shocked and put this show on for the Israelites.
Did you just think of that?
No, you've
been thinking that.
Yes, for many, many years.
That's a good point.
Because I think of it as parents. We find out our kids did something wrong during the day while they're at school, or wait till your daddy gets home or something like that. So it's like we have hours before we actually can kill them. And so when they come home, we are going to now create the anger, right? So inside, I'm like, it's not like, oh my God, you just broke something or just punched me in the face. I am now going to find it somewhere in me. So it doesn't say don't get angry. It says, maybe you count to 10, and if you need to be angry to put on a show, it seems like Maimonides is saying, it's like love. If you don't love your neighbor, you should still act lovingly. And even if you don't feel anger, sometimes you might have to act angry on cue. But, it's those little irritations that we have to, so we should fake it. Like Judaism, I love when I teach bar mitzvah students, they're always like, so Judaism is all about lying. I'm like, not lying, but, we have, my mother would be yelling at us as a kid when we were kids. And I deserved it. But let's just make sure you understand, I deserve to be yelled at. But someone calls on that phone. And most of us probably have the same story. Someone calls on the phone because my dad is a moil and they call all day long. This is before internet and emails and fax machines. She picks up the phone, hello? It was like, she's gonna kill us. She never hit me in my life, but she's gonna kill me. But she picks up that phone. It drove us crazy. We wish we didn't have cell phones back then, but we would have called her just to make her pick it up and be nice. Don't worry, when she hung up the phone, you better watch out. And when Dad gets home, but and I always believed my dad was faking it, it was just so obvious he could care less. So, but it was, the idea is, so Maimonides talked about it.
But it's interesting because it's funny that what spoke to you was that part.
Right.
What spoke to me was the part about when we get so angry that it clouds our emotions and it robs us really of clarity and wisdom. And that's the part that spoke to me, was the danger of, of anger.
There's some great ones here.
Yeah, let's see.
Rambam, Maimonides defines true anger as losing control. I agree. You can be angry, but almost not at that moment. Be angry later or before, but during your anger moment, don't be angry, which is a funny thing because it's something inside, right? He's talking about an inside thing. Moses was angry at the rock and water. It does seem like, oh, you rebels, look what we're doing. Yeah, Moses does lose control of his anger. He kills someone. I mean, they deserve to die, the Egyptian beating the guy. But Moses, and by the way, I think Moses did do something wrong by breaking the tablets. My other part of that is, I said he knew it was coming. The other part was, he seems to have some trouble controlling his anger throughout his life.
I think Moses is an example of this, where it kind of clouds you.
And if you never show your anger, then how are you a balanced person to know the difference between being humble? Right? I think that's right. How can you have good without bad? How can you be angry and not humble? You need both in your life. There's a balance.
Yeah. And I think that sometimes that anger can fuel us to do wonderful things. Like I think of all the racism work that's going on, right? I think a lot of that is fueled by anger and injustice. So anger we need that emotion.
Right. It's that many rabbis say that to not get angry is to not, it's to stand idly by the blood of our neighbors. Larry, I see you, and then we'll read Paul's thing.
I was just wondering, how did Rambam or the other rabbis kind of rationalize when God became angry with us, when he flooded the world and then obviously was mad with the golden calf. So how did they rationalize that anger, especially when we're supposed to emulate God on the good things, but not now when he's angry with us?
It's a great question.
That is a great question.
I moved to Pittsburgh, 19 years ago, and I'm teaching 8th grade class. So it's the post-religious school that I didn't get to teach, and these are my first time that I meet these 8th graders. They're all hockey players. Saturday afternoon after services, they're all smelly. And, we're serving them lunch. And I try to teach the stuff they didn't learn in religious school. So the very first day of class, I took the Torah out, the Eitz Chaim, actually it was a Hertz back then. And I said, God is a jealous God. God is an angry God. God makes mistakes in the Torah. And one of the students was very upset. They go, no, God is perfect. And I said, but would you say jealousy is perfect? God doesn't get jealous. So I open up the Torah and I show God. God is God is a jealous God. Kid walks out of class, drops out, joins Chabad, and so the idea is that some of us can't handle the truth, but yes, the Torah is filled with God's vengeance, wrath. And God says, "I am an angry God. There is no other God. Don't be an idolater. I can tell you that."
And just like when I think about God needs people and we need each other to sometimes talk us down. Like
Moses talks God down all the time.
Yeah. And Abraham, negotiating with God and trying to deal with God's kind of more reasonable side.
You're like a negotiator, God, you can't kill everyone. What are the Nanjas gonna say? That's
and here's Shelley's comments.
The best example of God's anger is the flood, right? And then afterwards, and I think so personally, now, Ray, I can't speak for Maimonides or the Talmud. I think that we said once that how are we created in God's image? It's our characteristics, humility and modesty and this, but we also have the bad ones, anger and jealousy and wrath. It's the 7 deadly sins. We believe God has all those things in God too. According to Judaism, God has a Yetzer Hara, an evil inclination, but God learns and rises above and lets Moses talk God down. Now, sometimes I think that God is throwing Moses a softball and saying, please, like God says to Moses, let me alone so I can do something. Well, it's God. Moses is not really stopping. That's me like saying to Amy, okay, hold me back. I'm going to kill that kid. That's me begging Amy to hold me back. And I feel like God sometimes is teaching us to, hold God back. But yeah, no one kills more people than God. And God does get angry, but we do like to think that God goes above it. Or is it an acting job? As Paul said, my dad did a great job acting angry. Although at the time I didn't realize it was an act, he was totally in control, right? It's scary. When you deal with an in control angry person, much scarier, because you should just, because there's no hiding. And by the way, we like to think God learns from it. Like at the end of the flood, God says, I will never again destroy the world. To me, it's almost like God is feeling remorse. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. I feel like after the flood.
That was a tough one to take back.
Yeah. I was like, after the flood, I feel like if I was going to try to read, we used to do these bibliodramas where we act out the actors, but not in the words. I would say that God's like, maybe I won't do that again. There wasn't even a theory that God did it over and over again. This was not the first time God attempted humanity. All right. Should we go on to another thingy?
Let's move on.
Move on. Okay, there's a little one. Just to end on the anger thing. It's shorter. Okay, so how do we avoid anger, right? It's only this little thingy. Mm-hmm. So here, why don't we just read it so we can move on to a longer one. Okay. So how do we avoid anger? This is the Talmud 2,500 years ago. And the sages taught about those who are insulted and do not insult. I love that line. That's in Maimonides, who hear their shame and do not respond, who act out of love and are joyful in suffering. I'm not so sure I agree with that. Sounds like another religion. The verse says in the book of Judges, and that they that love God are as the sun going forth in its might. Love over hate. Okay, so silence. So the Talmud goes into this thing about silence. Be quiet, but it's still talking really about anger avoidance. So should we call? Hey, Harvey, can you see this? All right. And then I'll look at the chat because I can't see at the same time. So, Harvey, why don't you read us Talmud, Kiddushin, dot 71b.
Okay. Rav Yehuda said to Ula, if so, what shall we do? How can we clarify which families are of unflawed lineage? Ula said to him, go after the silence like the way the people of the West, Eretz Yisrael, examine. When two people quarrel with each other, they observe which of them becomes silent first. Then they say, this silent party is of finer lineage. Rav says the silence of Babylonia is its lineage. In other words, this is an effective method of examining a person's lineage in Babylonia as well. The Gemara asked, is that so? But Rav arrived at the house of the son of a vinegar strainer and examined them. What is it not that he conducted an examination into their lineage? The Gemara answers, no, he conducted an examination into their silence. This is what Rav said to those conducting the examination. Examine whether they become silent when they quarrel or whether they do not become silent. Now, do you believe all that junk?
Well, okay. So first, when we were preparing for this class, this lineage thing sounds like something from Harry Potter about mudbloods, right? Let's see who's got better blood. But what I love about the Talmud here is it actually moves away from genetics and who's your father to how you behave, your characteristic, right? Silence is not something you pass down from generation to generation. I mean, maybe, but the idea is in a fight, who shuts up? Right? That's the better lineage. Like if you're choosing a spouse for your child, and you see one family that's, fighting all the time or cutting each other off, I always find that when in families that cut each other off, it's usually generational. Someone says, my brother cut off my sister. And I'll say, I guarantee you saw one of your grandparents cut off someone else, or their siblings, or their aunts and uncles. It's so maybe it is in the blood, but I can say that what the Talmud is saying is lineage is not based on, whose father is better than whom. Are they in control, out of control anger? It was the out of control part is me, out of control humility, out of control anger. I do believe we're moderation. I disagree. Yeah. So Harvey, my answer is I disagree with everything that says you have to be all of something, never angry or purely humble. I think that we are the middle ground, even though it's not cool to be a moderate anymore. I think we are a moderate movement. I think there are religions that are in the excess. Everything has to be over the top. And there are religions that are abstinence. Don't touch it ever. I love people always are not. There's certain people in our synagogue who are always attacking me about alcohol. And they're like, there should be, alcohol destroys lives. There should be no alcohol anywhere, ever. And my answer is that's not how we're going to fix alcoholism. It's by acting like it doesn't exist, but actually modeling responsible drinking, I think, is a safer way than abstinence. I met with when the casinos opened up, we had a few people who were experiencing gambling addiction. And I met with one of the gambling addiction experts of the city that if you ever called 1-800-GAMBLER or something, and that he taught these people. And because I want to try to understand it, because the casinos were opening up. And he used to work with AA. And AA was very big on abstinence. I've not touched a thing for XXX. And what he found with his studies on addiction was it was more of not being able to deal with the world, in moderation. And I have addiction in my family, and Amy knows, like, my kid's killing me last week or 3 days ago because I became a vegetarian. He's like, Dad, of course you can figure out which kid. Dad, why are you a vegetarian? You stupid. It's no reason. Your reason's not, you don't care about animals. And I'm like, because, and Amy's like, it's because he doesn't have a middle thing. It's either all or nothing for Alex, and that's not healthy to be all or nothing. We're supposed to find that middle ground, and a little humility. Like Heidi said in a comment to us, there's a balance between humility and anger.
Yeah, I don't know. What I take from what I think these texts have in common is finding that control within oneself. Is finding that control in terms of humility, in terms of anger. It's really controlling one's inner life. That's kind of what I find is the common theme here.
Yeah, and that control does, by the way, let's go back. I like that reverse ego. I've never used the term, but if that means that by, that I feel better about myself when I show it. So I come home and about this vegetarian thing. And I said, because I don't feel good about myself after I eat the turkey and the meat. I feel sick because I overate. And that's when I saw it. One of my bar mitzvah students last week says, I don't eat chocolate anymore. I said, you don't like chocolate? He says, no, I love chocolate. He says, he just didn't feel good about chocolate controlling him, and that he loved chocolate so much, he gave up chocolate. And as Mark would say, that's certainly reverse ego, because we feel very proud of ourselves when we don't eat something we love. It's very easy to give up something you hate. That's kind of easy. Oh, I'm going to give up Brussels sprouts, which I like. But it's harder to give up something you love. And again, not very Jewish abstinence. As someone said, not very Jewish. So that's okay. Comments, questions. I see Irv, your hand. You're ready. We hear you.
Okay, moderation is good, but our daughter works in the field of substance abuse. And it's not a choice of moderation whether it's tobacco or alcohol. There's changes in the brain chemistry so that once you start, you can't moderate. So
It's very good. I talked to someone on heroin, heroin's a problem. And like let's experiment, let's try something. Yeah. Well, heroin, you try it once and changes your chemical makeup or whatever. And now you're hooked for the rest of your life. So yes, it's not so easy. Certain things are not moderation. Murder is not really something you can, you should only do like once. So, and heroin, and if you do have addiction, yes, even the little taste could, and that's why they get the chips. So very good, Irv, thank you. Next, I saw a hand. I saw a hand somewhere. Thought I saw a hand. All right. So we're working on it, by the way. We may have some more exciting news for Mondays as well. We're trying to share with, someone asked me as they're reading the Sunday email, they said, but in the beginning, you just put your stuff on. I said, no, that was the only stuff going on the first 2 months. I said, but now we've got Sisterhood and Men's Club. We've got First Mondays. We've got Winter Speaker Series, and it's exciting. So we're trying to keep this spread out. As we were talking before we started, we may be doing this for a little while longer. We do feel like we've hit that Zoom fatigue wall and gone through it for a moment. Who knows what Christmas and New Year's look like, but we're not going anywhere. So, if the snow's coming tonight, I think. So enjoy.
Is next Monday a First Monday, Bernice?
Next Monday, 11:30. Yeah, next Monday's First Monday.
What is it, Bernice?
It's Barbara. Here, I can unmute you. Sorry. Here, go ahead, Bernice. Now.
It is from noon to 1, and it is Barbara Burston, and her topic, it also happens to be Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. And her topic is FDR. Was he good for the Jews?
Interesting.
It's a great question. Because, it's hard growing up. FDR walks on water as we are children, right? There are certain presidents. You don't remember this, but a long time ago, you're like, oh, I hope my kid grows up to be president. So FDR was always like, oh, he saved the world. I remember reading books as a child about FDR. And you're like, and then I went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and I read on the little wall, what did FDR know? What did the Americans know? Why didn't they bomb the train tracks into Auschwitz? And, what was going on in America during the FDR for Jews? And, it's a really hard question. Because it's like talking about Gandhi. If anyone really studied Gandhi, right, the greatest guy ever. Unless you look really closely at his attitudes towards Jews and Nazis, and then you might not be as happy. So it's very interesting when we see these well-rounded heroes. Shelley.
When I was growing up, my parents had 2 huge pictures on the wall in our living room. One was of Chaim Weizmann. The other one was of FDR. And then the Yalta papers came out. And when the Yalta papers came out, FDR went to the basement.
Right. Yeah, we have, this is a sermon for another day, but we always talk about how do we judge people, their worst moment, their best moment, their last moment, their first moment. And we talk about all these different characters. King David is from King David to Henry Ford, how do we judge people? And FDR is very complicated. I can't wait. Barbara Burston is one of the best. For me, I use her stuff for our history class as well. So Barbara is exciting. She just put a book out about Maslow, Sophie, and so this should be great. So next Monday at 12 p.m., First Mondays with Barbara Burston. Yeah, very
Thanks
good.
for being with us
Thank
today.
you.
Mark,
what do you got? Here, wait, I got you unmuted. Go ahead.
This is a different topic a bit, but does the question about FDR and, the pros and the cons, how does that relate to your comments about things like supporting Doctors Without Borders? And
I think it goes.
You know what I mean? That they have things they do that really are on, not to the degree with the Holocaust, but are on par with FDR's attitudes, for example. And it seems to me that it's the same idea, balance.
It is so hard when we have these conversations about things that, especially the anti-Israel sentiment, I get something like a BDS, a school, an actor, a rock star, someone says something about Israel. Can we separate the Israel from, they do all this good work and or let's get even better. They do all this good work and they hate Jews. Is it possible? That's a whole nother question. And you're right. We're all over the place on this one because, talk about the tough question. Can, Doctors Without Borders and Black Lives Matter. And there's so many of these questions. Can they still be our heroes? I think it goes back to King David questions. Can a murderer be a hero? And are we forgiving that, or can we appreciate the other stuff? Very hard for Jews, by the way. And I'm not saying
it's kind of interesting because it's back where we started.
Anger, humility.
Well, and looking and trying to judge people favorably,
right,
which is a Jewish attribute. So it's kind of interesting.
I played that game years ago as a rabbi. Can you make an excuse for anyone? The dog that bites black people was taught to bite black people. What about the human who's raised in the KKK and everyone's got an excuse? It's Larry. Yes, Larry.
I was going to say, I think we're also caught up in it, in the fact that, many of the right-wing Christians movement is supportive of Israel, not because they're supportive of Israel, because we're holding it in place for what they believe in. And yet there's a financial support, and then there's other support that comes with it. We're caught, in aligning with it, even though it's not really in the best interest necessarily of Jewish people. It's in their best.
Right. And then we got Jews for Jesus and Messianic Jews, and they just make us mad. They don't do anything. Most of them don't do anything to us. I mean, there are some people trying to convert us, but there are some who just living their lives, but they still make us mad.
What about UNICEF?
UNICEF,
a great educational program, but they've condemned Israel.
Yeah. It's United Nations. You could just say nowadays you can just say anything United Nations.
This is true.
Yeah, and can we support? It's
hard to separate.
It is. And my guess is that Barbara, will open up this door because that question obviously is going to be yes and no. My guess is, and you're already ready for the questions, but probably don't attack Barbara because she can't. That's every Jew's going to have a different answer. Can you buy a Mercedes-Benz now?
I'm sorry, okay. I'll miss her.
It'll be we'll have it from now on. The Monday and Thursday classes are going to be live streamed and are going to be put onto our website. So if you miss it, you can still catch up on it. We got that request. So that's why you see in the top corner, custom live streaming service. It doesn't go on immediately, but within a couple hours, it gets encrypted and it'll be on our YouTube channel.
And giving credit, we should give that credit, as I understand it came from Susie, that request. So
it did come from Susie.
Right? So
there's Susie.
So since we started this with that little,
Susie.
Thanks, Susie.
Mrs. President. All right. Thank you.
All right, everyone.
Stay safe, stay
warm.
warm.
Thanks for your questions
and
sharing.
We're going